Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries. The morning after the storm, rescuers boarding the shattered remains of a ship off Tasmania's coast found a man named John Roberts. He couldn't swim, so he had lashed himself to a heavy iron ring bolt on the upper deck, hoping to be washed ashore safely. He froze to death waiting. But the true horror lay below the shattered deck. In the waist-deep, freezing black water of the lower hold, the bodies of dozens of men floated in the dark, entirely trapped. These men were passengers on the George III, an aging 400-ton British ship that had sailed from Woolwich, England, carrying 308 souls. This chart breaks down the survivors of the wreck, showing a staggering disparity. While the vast majority of the crew and guards made it out alive, out of the 134 people who died, 128 of them were convicts. That lopsided death toll immediately sparked rumors of a systemic cover-up. Bound for Van Diemen's Land, modern-day Tasmania, this was the terminus for transportation, shipping convicts overseas for forced labor. Looking at its jagged southern coastline, you see why it was the ultimate open-air prison. Surrounded by freezing seas, convicts had nowhere to run. To get them there, the George III was retrofitted into a floating fortress. A massive, restrictive iron cage was built directly into the hold to securely contain 220 male convicts for months at sea. To understand the allegations that those hatches were deliberately locked as the ship sank, investigators had to look back at a voyage that had been plagued by disaster since it crossed the equator. 2 months into the journey, an accident with a naked flame triggered an explosive burst of flame deep in the wooden belly of the ship. The fire spread rapidly toward the ship's magazine, which was packed with copper kegs of gunpowder. Recognizing the immediate danger, the crew released the convicts to help fight the blaze. 2 prisoners, William Nelson and David Jones, grabbed the blistering hot kegs with their bare hands and threw them overboard, saving the ship from detonating. But the flames destroyed a significant portion of the ship's provisions. Instead of stopping at a nearby port for fresh supplies, Captain William Moxey ordered everyone on half rations for the remainder of the voyage. Down in the poorly ventilated iron cage, the convicts were subjected to freezing seawater leaking through the seams. Combined with the severely restricted diet, scurvy tore through the hold. 14 men died of the disease before they ever saw the coast of Tasmania. Among the dead were William Nelson and David Jones, the 2 men who had burned their hands saving the ship. On the evening of March 12th, with disease still ravaging the passengers, Captain Moxey made a fateful call. Rather than risk being blown offshore by the winds, he decided to cut through the tortuous D'Entrecasteaux Channel in the dark. The crew reported 20 fathoms of safe clearance as the massive wooden ship glided through pitch-black waters, ocean swells crashing against the coastal rocks. Then, the water rapidly shallowed to less than 4 fathoms. Before the helmsman could turn the wheel, the hull violently struck an unmapped submerged reef. The heavy ocean swell picked the vessel up and slammed it back down onto the rocks. The repeated pounding snapped the mainmast in half and opened the wooden hull, allowing freezing seawater to pour inside. Down below, the 220 male convicts were trapped. The guards kept the hatches locked tight, confining the panicked men in the pitch-dark iron cage as icy water rapidly rose to their waists. Desperate to survive, prisoners tried to force open the hatch with their bare hands. In response, soldiers stationed above fired their muskets down into the hole to keep them contained. At least 1, and possibly up to 3 men, were shot and killed. Captain Moxey focused entirely on loading the women, children, and crew into the few available lifeboats. The convicts were kept locked below deck until the ship was completely awash, ensuring that dozens of sick, weakened men drowned right in their beds. When the survivors finally reached Hobart, the lopsided death toll caused severe public outcry, but the official Dutterment inquiry explicitly cleared the ship's officers of any wrongdoing. The inquiry accepted the guards' testimony that the musket fire was merely used to intimidate the panicked crowd, and concluded that prioritizing the crew and free passengers over the prisoners was simply a matter of standard maritime procedure. That sterile bureaucratic ruling offered no solace for the 128 convicts, whose bodies washed up on the shoreline. Nor did it help the ship's surgeon, who had wandered off into the cold Tasmanian bush during the rescue and died of exposure. The only tangible result of the disaster was a renewed effort to accurately map the hazardous coastline, eventually leading to the construction of the Cape Bruni Lighthouse in 1838 to warn future ships away from the reef. Today, the Actaeon Reef remains exposed to heavy swells, slowly grinding the last few surviving wooden timbers into the ocean floor. An uncharted rock may have torn the George III apart, but the men in the lower hold were drowned by the cold, calculating machinery of an empire that viewed them as cargo rather than humans.